Ghost of Tsushima was my favorite game of last year, not because it completely revolutionized the history of video games, but simply because it did everything right. Every element of this game was clearly crafted out of pure love and dedication. The exploration, the combat, the visuals, the setting, everything was polished to a degree that we don't see very often. It was also one of the few samurai games that we get, especially in the recent console generations. But on top of that, I feel like it was the one that truly managed to capture the samurai spirit and bring Japan to life, which is interesting considering it wasn't made by a Japanese developer. Yep, this was developed by Sucker Punch, the creators of Infamous and Sly Cooper. I platinumed the game, I started a New Game Plus as soon as it became available, and I even spent a considerable amount of time in its multiplayer, which is uncommon for me since I'm not a big fan of online games. That's how much I loved Ghost of Tsushima. So when they announced the director's cut and the new expansion, I knew this was going to be a day one purchase for me. I was lucky enough to get a review code thanks to PlayStation. I played through the whole thing and completed it once again. Now the real question is it worth a buy? And because of the fact that this has a pretty strange pricing model, that question is more relevant than ever. So sit back, grab some popcorn, and enjoy my review of Iki Island. Now before I start talking about Iki Island, let's talk about the director's cut first. So what the hell is this? Well, technically it's a $30 PS5 upgrade. It brings native 4K, 3D audio, adaptive triggers, and things like that. If you want a full deep dive on the technical aspect of the director's cut, check out the DF Tech review, it's great as usual. But obviously the most important feature of the director's cut is a new expansion featuring a brand new island called Iki. The problem is you cannot get that expansion separately, which means that you must get the director's cut if you want to play it. That being said, you can simply buy the $20 PS4 version of the director's cut without upgrading to PS5, which isn't that far off from a standalone expansion, but still you have to pay for the director's cut features even if you don't really care about them. This has caused quite a lot of controversy online because most PS5 upgrades have been completely free so far, and I can understand the frustration, especially since Sucker Punch did release a free 60 FPS upgrade for the PS4 version via backwards compatibility, which I'm sure would have been enough for a lot of players who would have preferred to get the expansion without the director's cut features at a lower cost. But now that we can't do anything about it, you gotta ask yourself, is it worth it? That's what I'll try to answer. First, I'm going to talk about Iki Island, and I'll end the video with my general thoughts on the whole package. So here we go. In this new story, Jin, our protagonist, travels to Iki Island to investigate rumors of a Mongol presence led by a mysterious figure known as the Eagle, a shaman who uses a drug to take over people's mind and keep them under control. Tone-wise, Iki Island is really different from the original island of Tsushima, mainly because of the fact that it's a place still dealing with the aftermath of a past invasion led by none other than your own father. The invasion ultimately failed and ended up with your father being murdered, a deeply traumatic event that Jin must carry throughout the main game's story. Since then, the island has fallen into the hands of various raider groups and criminals who've grown to absolutely despise your family. I don't want to spoil too much, but in this expansion, you'll get to delve into Jin's dark past, and you'll get to see him come to terms with his father's death in a very interesting manner. I really liked the story of Iki Island. Jin remains an awesome protagonist, and the cast of side characters you meet is fairly memorable as well. One of the things I enjoyed the most about the main game is that it felt like a superhero origin story where you basically witnessed the birth of the legendary Ghost of Tsushima. Iki Island is a direct continuation of this and introduces a villain that almost feels like the first proper supervillain of the franchise. I mean, the Eagle is pretty much Scarecrow in Batman with her experimental drugs and her tendency to exploit people's fears. And Jin gets a taste of the Eagle's medicine early on in the story, which causes him to experience some pretty crazy visions, forcing him to confront his inner demons. These nightmarish sequences can literally happen as you explore the open world or right in the middle of battle, making them truly invasive and an actual part of the gameplay. The other part of the story I really enjoyed was the fact that Jin must hide his identity because he's the son of the infamous Butcher of Iki. This creates a very interesting dynamic similar to Batman hiding the fact that he's Bruce Wayne, which is also reflected in Jin's secret identity as the Ghost. On top of that, you also get flashback sequences that bring you back to Iki's invasion. Lots of cool stuff happening story-wise, much more than I was expecting, to be honest. Ghost of Tsushima has always been one of the most beautiful games I've ever seen, and playing the director's cut on PS5 just reminded me how utterly breathtaking this game can be. The art style is gorgeous. What I like about it is that it doesn't simply aim for realism, it wants to convey an idyllic version of Japan, a version that is in constant motion and drowned in colors. Although from a pure visual standpoint, Iki Island is relatively similar to what you can find on Tsushima, with some obvious exceptions. That being said, it does feel slightly different and offers a more maritime aesthetic this time around, with lots of coasts, hidden caverns, and waves crashing on rocks. This has to be one of the most peaceful game there is. It cultivates this feeling of loneliness similar to Shadow of the Colossus, but instead of being slightly depressing, it feels incredibly cozy. Not once I felt bored exploring this world, despite the similarities with the environments of the base game, which speaks for itself. But aside from gorgeous visuals, what does this expansion has to offer? Well, if you've played Ghost of Tsushima, you kind of already played Iki Island. Obviously there are new things, but generally it is the same type of experience. So if you were looking for a drastic change like Undead Nightmare for example, you won't find it here. But if you were simply looking for more Ghost of Tsushima like myself, well, this is exactly it. As was the case in the original game, Iki Island offers main and secondary tales. The main story missions are good and tell a fairly compelling narrative featuring a surprising amount of set pieces, but also not that much variety, unfortunately. But just like in the original game, I do have a slight preference for the side missions, the various collectibles, optional locations like shrines, caves, and all the exploration that comes with it. Those will allow you to have a better understanding of the world and the stakes at play, knowledge that you can even deepen by reading records found throughout the island. It's also during these side missions, more specifically the mythic tales, that the game tackles supernatural and folkloric themes. And even though magic isn't an actual thing in this game, it's fascinating to observe how legends can shape a village and its people. The majority of the optional quests will be somewhat familiar to you, like attack this Mongol camp, save these prisoners, and so on. But Iki Island does bring some interesting ideas, like this mission where you need to use your flame arrows to light your way through a cave, or when you explore this shipwreck while trying to prevent waves from knocking you down. Those are great, but unfortunately the expansion doesn't really have the time to expand on these ideas. They also added new activities on top of the ones that were already in the original, like these archery challenges, flute minigames, and duels. While not groundbreaking by any means, these activities are fun little things to do on the side. Exploration also received some minor twists, like the fact that your grappling hook can now be used to lower bridges, tree trunks, and remove planks blocking the way, making it a tool used for puzzle situations and not only traversal. Also, your horse can now ram into enemies, which is a ridiculous amount of fun. When it comes to the physical act of exploring the world, this has always been a completely effortless endeavor thanks to multiple quality of life features. Crazy fast load times, the ability to save pretty much everywhere, being able to call your horse at any point in time, things like that. Now you can even get saddlebags for your horse, allowing you to collect extra ammunitions, and you can even replay previously completed camps and duels. This is just a flawless experience that throws absolutely nothing in the way of your enjoyment. Now let's look at combat. This is definitely the one area of the DLC where I noted the most significant changes. In my opinion, the combat of Ghost of Tsushima has always been the best sword-based combat system in gaming history. There it is, I said it. It looks really freaking cool, it's fast, tactical, and super fleshed out. So much so that it took me a good hour before getting back into it and find my old reflexes. If you're not familiar with it, the whole thing is based on stances. Depending on which type of enemy you encounter, you'll want to choose a specific stance. And when you're overwhelmed by warriors wielding swords, spears, and larger weapons, the combat becomes a dance where you switch between stances and items. It's very fun. But this time, Iki Island introduces two new enemy types that completely change how I usually approach combat. First of all, some enemies now have more than one weapon and will switch mid-combat, forcing you to take quick decisions and constantly change stances to keep the upper hand. And to make things worse, there's now a shaman that will buff the enemies around him. They usually stand pretty far away from the action, forcing you to go out of your ways to kill them first in order to make the other enemies around them less deadly. Those few changes might seem little, but they do change the flow of combat encounters and make them even more challenging. In the end, what do I think of the director's cut? I'd say that Iki Island is definitely a must play if you love Ghost of Tsushima. Yes, it's pretty much more of the same, but if you needed a good reason to jump back into this game, this is it. That being said, I don't think that you need to buy the director's cut at all cost. Yes, the improved resolution and the haptic feedbacks are nice, but those features are not considerable enough to justify a $30 price point in my opinion. So if you are on the fence about buying the director's cut, maybe wait a little bit and see if the expansion eventually becomes available as a standalone purchase. But if you really can't wait and want to play more Ghost of Tsushima right now, $30 on PS5 and $20 on PS4 is not that bad for a 12 to 15 hour long DLC. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please, as usual, drop a like. It really helps the channel out. And if you're new, make sure to subscribe for more. That's pretty much it, and I'll see you guys later.